Welcome to inSUBSTANTIA. I'm Gabor Farkas. Today, we look at how artificial intelligence and blockchain meet in practice. AI is now involved in decisions that matter from healthcare to justice. That power brings questions about fairness, transparency, privacy, and accountability. Blockchain is often presented as a way to record what happens and who is responsible. It can help with traceability and audit, but it can also create new problems if we do not design it with care. To guide us through this nuanced and timely discussion, I'm delighted to welcome Mariana de la Roche Wills, co-chair of the INATBA AI and Blockchain Convergences Task Force and a leader at BlackVogel. Mariana brings unique expertise and insight into how these technologies can be combined effectively, ethically, and sustainably. Together, we will explore the promises, controversies, and realistic pathways forward. Whether you are already deeply engaged with AI and blockchain, or just wondering how these innovations could affect our shared future, this episode is for you. Before we begin, a quick note. We experienced a technical issue at the start of our original recording. My introduction, along with my first invitation to Mariana to introduce herself, were unfortunately lost. We have re-recorded this section, so you may notice a small difference in tone and sound. Mariana, welcome to inSUBSTANTIA. To begin, could you share a little about your journey and what brought you to the intersection of AI and blockchain?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, and also for being open to discuss these topics. As you mentioned, my name is Mariana Roche. I'm the founder and CEO of BlackVogel, which is a consultancy based in Germany where we support the Web3 space. I'm also leading the AI and blockchain task force and INATBA. But before that, I was also a member of the board, and I led the social impact and sustainability working group for over 5 years. And I think that the latest is really important because it explains basically my passion in the industry. My background actually is in law. And I did my major in law was criminal law, and I did post-degree studies in human rights and humanitarian law back in Colombia, where I'm originally from. And then I did a master in public administration, focusing on digital projects in Germany at the Hertie School of Policy. But I actually started working on the development sector, or even before that, I was working on the transitional court, in the first court, in the process of the paramilitaries in Colombia when they surrendered the weapons. So I was part of the team doing research at the international level of trying to understand how to apply international law into Colombia. And on that, I work a lot on education of prosecutors and judges and basically the justice system. So that is my passion on education as well. You can see I still do quite a lot on that, but in other topics. And I did work quite a lot with NGOs, the United Nations, the Colombian government on social impact, mostly looking at justice applications for adolescents at that time, and some other topics on water and sanitation. And I got absolutely frustrated to see how slow progress is and how much bureaucracy and how many intermediaries you have when you try to develop projects, and basically seeing how the resources were staying in the intermediaries and not coming into the actual beneficiaries of the actions. And I decided to explore how to maybe do something different, and that's how I landed on blockchain. So that it got my attention because nothing has pushed humanity forward than in the way that technology does, right? If you think in the car, the way in which humanity has transformed since the moment that we start using automobiles for transportation of products, like our own mobility, right? So I got really curious to understand how technology could help us at the time to maybe achieve a better impact in a more direct way with the beneficiaries, and also help like societies and organizations to just solve issues that were not solved in decades, if not centuries, right? And that's how I started to look into blockchain in particular. So I always say that I went backwards because everyone entered first in crypto and then started to look at blockchain. I actually entered to look at blockchain and blockchain infrastructures and how this technology could help us to deliver impact directly and empower people, for example, that has been excluded from the traditional financial sector, or actually like do donations in a more transparent way where I can see as a donor where my funding is going, and actually like seeing that is like coming to the last beneficiary and what they're doing with them. So all of these different topics what drove me into the blockchain space. I started back in 2018 then directly on my first job in the industry, working with one layer one, where I was basically like working in the intersection of the developers, the stakeholders, and the communication office as a lead project manager for all the sustainability projects. At that time we did projects with the European Commission at the level of the Horizons 2020 back then. I think that now they're called Horizon 2030, or like probably they changed the name again. I did some projects on carbon removals and climate data with the government of Chile and the government of Canada. That actually right now is a whole project called DEMIA, which I'm still collaborating with, and I'm really happy to see how they have grown. I did tons of things on infrastructure with NIDO and the Japanese government. We did like some on climate, no, actually energy transition here in Germany, and a lot of like projects on mobility and smart cities in the Nordics. So that actually like got me to have like a better understanding of the different applications. And then because of my background in law, I started to just like look at really like more like regulation, and of course the focus here has been in financial regulation. So that's where we started to look more into MiCAR and the AML and some of the other different package like the data act and so on. And here the connection with AI was just natural, right? Because we needed to understand how AI could help us not only at the compliance level in like understanding patterns when we see transactions, or like doing like data analytics of the transactions, but also and something that I've been exploring lately, and I have seen a lot of noise also on X on this, is how to use X to make some X, like I see the post on X. I have seen some a lot of noise about how to use AI to make better decisions at the investment level by using algorithms. So I think that is not only at the protection level, but also like how to make the industries like faster and better. So the connection there has been like incredible. So we have explored quite a lot on that topic. We have also like looked at the intersection of other technologies like quantum. Especially right now with like all the different threats that like that we have seen in the hack. So quantum is actually like something that I think that doesn't receive as much attention as it should, but I'm happy to start to see that this is changing. We are working right now on a report on the intersection of AI, blockchain, and digital identity. So there's a lot of things going on, but I think that now you get like more or less how I started and where we are right now.
Thank you, Mariana. We will now return to our original session. You will hear a small change in the sound and the picture. The next exchange begins where I move from your background to the first ethical question.
There you go.
Mariana, given that AI decisions in areas such as healthcare or criminal justice have profound human impacts, like diagnosing serious illnesses or influencing court sentences, why is transparency not merely beneficial, but ethically essential?
Yeah, I mean, it is not just transparency. Is the transparency, the explicability of the algorithm, is the privacy rights, and also is the human oversight. So every time that you have tech deploy and this application could impact humans' life or people's life, you need to have like certain parameters, right? In Europe, we have the AI Act, which will tell you, depending of the risk level, you need to take certain measurements. The higher the level, more measurements you will need. But to put it like super, super easy, you need a transparency because you need the people that is using the system to understand what is it that they're agreeing to and what are the implications of using that system. You need the explicability because we need to be able to understand how that AI is taking certain decisions and why they took it in that way. We need the oversight because every single decision that can impact people's life needs to be overseen by a human and not by and not just by the AI. And at the end, we also need to take care of the privacy rights because, especially on health, we are talking about sensitive data that has a different level of protection under GDPR, at least here in Europe. So let me put you an example. So when you go to the doctor, you need to provide some information to your doctor in order to your doctor to understand what is happening with you, which tests they will need to run, and basically what's happening. Then they will ask for certain tests, they will make the tests, and then they will get the results, and then they will tell you what it is that you have. I don't know where you are based or your listeners are based, but here in Germany, I barely get to see the results of my test. If everything is okay, then that was it. I I do not know anything else about my doctor until I go to my next checkup. If there is something weird with one of the tests, then the doctor calls you and says, like, hey, we need to repeat the test. You go, you repeat, and then the same story. If everything is good, then you're good. If you do this with AI, let's say you have an app, you provide certain information, and then the AI will tell you certain recommendations. This is already happening, right? That there is applications where you put like your information. For example, I don't know, I am diabetic. I have Hashimoto. I have this and these issues. And then the AI, based on the information that you are providing, the AI will give like certain health recommendations or advice or just on how to move forward with your life or like small daily choices that you can take to improve your health, right? This, whether you take it or not, is voluntary. And then if you make your all decisions based on AI without consulting a doctor, well, that might be like probably your responsibility. But the question here is what is happening with the data that you are providing to that AI, right? Because the AI is giving those recommendations because it's probably doing also analysis of people that has different health issues or characteristics, such as you, in order to understand what is the best way to or like what are like the best recommendations for you. But what happened to your data? Do you know with whom are they sharing the data? How your data is processed? Do you even know if they are anonymizing your data or that they actually like have all the information about you, age, and health issues, and also maybe location because that might impact your health, right? This is really critical because then it means that someone has all the information about you, and depending of where you are, like I mean, like for me, that's really concerning. But I know that there is like certain countries, especially in the north of Europe, that where people share a lot of their information, they're happy with it. If you are not in a democratic country, I will be even concerned that like my information about my location is public, right? So here is really interesting the role of blockchain because with blockchain, what you can do is create privacy of that data. So we can create permissions for the people for when the people provides the data to the app, their personal data. They can decide how this data is shared, with whom, for what reasons, and also we can create incentive for the people to share the data. So we can give something back for using the data for whatever it is that we're using it. At the same time, the person is like, of course, getting recommendations that are going to be adjusted, but they're also having a better understanding of like how the data was used and who has it and all of this, right? So this is one of the things. When it comes to you were talking about like criminal cases, I will highly recommend not to, because here we are also like talking about like limitation of the of like the right of like the live like the freedom if you send someone to jail based on the decision of an algorithm. And we will need to understand super clear how that algorithm was built. So this is all the part of transparency, but also like the explicability part, because we will need to be completely sure that there were not biases. Biases on the country of origin, biases on the color of the skin, or any other like socio-economical characteristics of these persons that could have made the AI decide that this person was guilty or not. And I think that if there is not a human supervising and overseeing these decisions, we can end in a quite clear violation of rights. Um, so I think that on that part is critical, not only the transparency that you were mentioning, but also like the explicability of the decisions of the AI, as well as the human or a human overseeing the decisions made by the AI before implementing it. There's a horrible example of what happened when you do not have human overseeing this. And I think that, I don't know if everyone saw the report of the Lavender AI deployment and in the Israel-Palestine conflict right now, where decisions by the AI were taken as certain without having any human supervision. So there's some ethical principles and considerations that needs to be taken into account. And for me, anything that can impact a human life needs to be supervised by a human. Like the decision needs to come from a human, not by an AI.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. One of the things you mentioned really connects to what's happening with electronic ID projects around the world. Some countries have already rolled them out.
Mm-hmm.
You can now have your passport or ID card directly on your phone. I've actually worked on projects where the idea was to link medical data with all the other private data we generate every day. And we generate a lot. The problem is most of that data isn't really ours. It's collected, stored, and monetized by the big tech companies. They're not collecting it to serve us. They're collecting it to sell us more things, often things we don't even need. Jaron Lanier talks about this in his book, Who Owns the Future. He suggests we could move away from the so-called free model where we're the product and towards something else where we pay directly for the services we use. That would let us keep our data locally, maybe on our phones, and decide what we want to share and for what purpose. That makes particular sense for medical data. We'd have full control over what's stored and who sees it. We could even imagine an AI that lives on your device, working just for you. Technically, it's complicated, but conceptually, it really makes sense. And that connects to another question. The ethics of AI making decisions, especially when those decisions could harm us. There's a lot of talk about bias in AI, how to detect it, how to remove it. But there's a paradox there. We criticize human bias, but if we remove all bias from AI, we risk creating something that no longer reflects us at all. Because bias is part of what makes us human, what makes decisions not only with logic, but with intuition, with emotion, with experience. If we strip all that away, would AI still act in a way we recognize as human? It's a philosophical question, and I don't think we'll answer it today, but it's worth keeping alive because it touches on something deeper, how we want to live and what kind of intelligence we want to share the world with?
I don't have an answer, but I have an opinion, if that makes any sense. I will start first with what you mentioned about the digital identities, and then I will go to the more philosophical part, because then I assume that there's going to be like more questions on that way. The digital identities that we have seen so far are not decentralized. These are governmental solutions that had been put into place. I I have my pro and cons for these type of solutions. I think that if we want people to be in control of the data, we need decentralized solutions. Because as long as there is a centralized entity that is collecting my data, owns my data, and profits from my data, I am not in fully control of my data. And this is there's a really funny saying on the crypto space that is, know your keys, know your money, because it basically goes back to the issue that we have with the banks. We need to wait for someone to authorize a transaction or a movement for us to move our own money. And I think with the data is the same, right? We have really cool initiatives in Europe. I don't know if you are familiar with the EPSI project. This is one of my favorite projects because they are creating an infrastructure for pan-European services where you have trusted issues that are registered in a database and are authorized to produce certain certificates. And if you go to one of them, then you can say like, hey, my name is Mariana Roche. I'm a citizen for this European country. Here's my ID. Then they will give you a certificate that says, yes, this is Mariana Roche. This is their age. And this is the country, everything. And then you can move around in different European jurisdictions and then just present your certificate. And then because it was issued by a trusted issuer, then it will be considered a true certificate, right? A real one, an authentic one. What is interesting here is that you have selective disclosure. So if I go to Italy and I want to buy a cigarette or a beer, where I'm buying it, they need to confirm that I'm more than 18 in most of the jurisdictions. But they don't need to see my name. They do not need to see my address. They do not need to see what is the color of my eyes according to my identity. They just need to know in which year I was born. Not even that. They just need to know that I'm more than 18. They don't need to know my exact age. And via this selective disclosure, I can get a certificate that says like, yeah, she can buy that thing. Like she's over 18. That's it, right? So this kind of projects is really interesting. But still, someone has my data at some place because they will need it to confirm that I was that person. They need to have it in record, right? So those are not data that technically belong to me. I mean, does my passport really belong to me, the data in my passport? Or like, that's one of the questions, right? This is the kind of project that we have seen. For the data use cases that you're mentioning, I think that what we actually need is a decentralized database where the data that I'm putting there is mine. And then if I want to share it and with whom I want to share it is a decision I make and I can revocate those permissions, right? That won't happen. That happen only if it's decentralized. I completely agree with you that right now, I mean, data is the new oil and everyone is profiting from the data. Everyone but the user. The user, the only thing that is getting for giving their data to Meta, Google, Amazon, and whoever is probably an marketing commercial of something that they not even need, but the algorithm behind things that you might want to buy, right? That's what we are getting out of it. That's it. So it's a really problematic system, I will say. And that's why I fundamentally believe that like for social media and all of these platforms, we will need decentralized databases and better data protection for the user because we are actually being used. We are not the user anymore. We are just what they're exploiting to profit from the data, which is really problematic. And that brings me to what is humanity, because that is also human. And I agree with you with the human biases. And if we look at what humanity is, you can be a really positive person, which I always try to be, and looking at the kindness in people. But a realistic person will also see what is happening in other areas of the world, like how we are bombing people, how we are mistreating people, how we still have like modern slavery, how we have violation of human rights, how we have a genocide going on, transmitting media everywhere. So all of these things are also human. And technology is just a tool. Technology is not good or bad, right? That's for AI, that's for blockchain, that's for the automotive sector and any other thing that it uses technology. It's just a tool, and it's a human decision how we use it, for good or for bad. Making AI human, I will not want that, because that means that what Lavender was doing to Palestinians is okay because it's human, and that's fundamentally wrong. What I think that we need to push forward is for technology development that is human-centric design, which is thinking in how to help humanity to become better. And that's different from making the technology human. Again, I didn't have the answers. This is just my personal opinion. And I will be a loud advocate of that. So we always keep in mind when we develop a project, we develop a solution, we develop a DApp, we develop an app, we develop a AI, on what are going to be the implications in real life, in the real economy, of the deployment of this whatever. And if something goes wrong, who is going to be accountable for making those calls, right? Because for me, like, this part of the accountability process is really, really important. And it's really, really difficult to do if you have decentralization and if you have, on top of that, AI. And this is also like one of those big questions which I don't have a clear answer, but we have a lot of AI right now that is being used by developers to code. And they are putting the apps the apps there. Mostly they were designed by the AI with like the supervision of the developer that deploy it. And then other people is using those apps. So what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if someone takes that app and uses it for evil purpose? Who is responsible? The one that used it for that purpose? The one that developed the app? Or the AI developer that did that AI that was used by a developer to generate that app? Those are questions that are open right now. We saw what happened in the Tornado Cash case, which is really problematic for many different reasons, particular for the violation of the principle of legality. But those are questions that we have in front of us, and there's no answer. And there's not going to be a clear answer because regulation evolved this fast, and tech already gave 3 times rounds around the regulation, and bad people will find always ways to do bad things regardless of the regulation. I think one of our mistakes is that we try to regulate so much, and that is preventing us for using tech to fighting the things that are being done with tech as well, right? Because they can be creative, and these people is not following the law, so they are creating as much as they want. But we could also be creative with the tools that we have with tech and change them instead of trying to regulate so much. Not saying that regulation is bad. I like regulation. I advocate a lot for regulation because I think that if people feel safe because there is regulation, they will use the technology more. But there needs to be a balance, because otherwise we're not going to go anywhere.
The question of technology and how it's used isn't new. It's been around for centuries. Every generation has faced it. Think of Gutenberg, or even earlier, the Chinese inventors of the printing press. Were they responsible for the hateful and dangerous material that was later printed, calling for someone's murder or even genocide? It's a hard question, complicated. And it's the same kind of question we're still grappling with today, especially when it comes to electronic identity or EID. I actually did an episode with the person leading the Swiss ID project. And many of the concerns you just mentioned came up in that conversation. Interestingly, the first version of the Swiss EID brought to votation in 2021 was rejected by the population. People didn't trust it, and rightly so. It was too centralized. But the project has since evolved in a completely new direction and was recently adopted, although by a very small margin. What I've been advocating for, and what I think could make sense more broadly, is a system based on a trusted third party. The idea is simple. The state guarantees your identity, but you don't have to expose it every time. You can have multiple avatars, multiple identities, as long as you stay within the law. If you break the law, there should be mechanisms to hold you accountable. But otherwise, you should have the freedom to move between identities without constant surveillance. The newer EID systems are moving toward that principle. They don't centralize everything in one place. They rely on technologies like blockchain or similar systems, where only the minimum necessary information is revealed. And you, the individual, decide what to show and what to keep private. That's the balance we're trying to reach. Verifiable identity without surrendering autonomy.
I agree, and actually, like, my question about the passport was completely ironical question, because it is your identity document, but it is not yours. You just hold it, right? So that's really interesting if you think in how dependent you are and how important it is for you to have an identification to access health, to access education, to move around borders. And it's a document that not even belongs to you, that it can be taken away from you in non-democratic states. I will check it out, the episode that you have with Switzerland, I think, that you mentioned, and the considerations that you make, because that was another question that I always have when I was talking about identities with some of the blockchain projects. And it's like, well, define identity. And the truth is that you have different identities. You have also like different cards in your wallet. This was the first example that I got. So you have a health card, you have probably your credit card, you have your ID permit, residence permit in my case, you have your driver license, and all of those things are part of your personality, part of your identity, but they're certificates. And you have all the certificates in your wallet. And depending on what you need, you will access one of your certificates. With the blockchain is the same, with the difference that I can have selective disclosure. I can select the certificate and select which part of the certificate I need to prove to access a service. I think that their solutions are really interesting when you look at identities, but the truth is that we need, for these particular parts, what you mentioned, there is the third party that we trust, that issue a certificate, that an ID was presented. And I had the opportunity to participate in a project that was looking into this a couple of years ago, and we came with a concept called identity on demand. So basically, you go to a trusted third-party provider, you present your identity, they verify that you are who you say that you are, and they give you a certificate that doesn't have any information about you, just the statement that they did a KYC on you, so that they verify that you are you. But this certificate is just a check that says, we did it. And then with this, ideally, you can go to a bank, you can go to a crypto exchange, and then open an account. The only thing that they need to know is that someone else can open that account, right? That data, right? So if something weird happened with your account, and then there is an authority that wish to know who is behind that certificate, they can go to the third-party provider and ask to open the data that is there. So they're the ones that actually can see it. That is really complicated to actually do, because each European country does KYC in different ways. In some countries like Germany, you need video. In some others, you don't need video. So aligning on how to produce those certificates is really complicated. And also, there's no trust between the different financial institutions that someone already actually did the KYC. They want to do it themselves. This was like that at that time. I have an experience a couple of weeks ago where I wanted to open an account in a neobank, and they told me that if I already have an account with any of a list of banks, then I could jump and not do the KYC, but they will take it directly from the other bank. And I was super happy when I saw that, because I was like, oh my God, they finally got it. We don't need to KYC people 5 times every time that they want to access the financial system. They just need to ask the neighbor, hey, did you already KYC this person? Thank you very much, right? They will access the data anyway via TFR. So I was really happy to see that they are already doing it, but I also was like, wow, it took really long time for them to realize of that. And these are things that we can easily do with technology. But again, this is not decentralized identities. This is digital identities. The information still doesn't belong to us. And I think that will be a next step in the evolution of tech. And I do not think that we are going to be the owners of our own data if we do not have decentralized identity, because identities is the cornerstone of every other solutions that you're going to build on top.
Yeah, that's a really interesting example, Mariana, and it actually makes me think of something related. AI systems rely on so much personal data that inevitably it brings up the question about privacy and control. There's a lot of talk about blockchain-based solutions, decentralized identifiers, smart contracts, all these tools that supposedly give users more say over how their data is used. But I keep wondering, how far does that really go in practice? I mean, do these systems truly give individuals more power to manage their data? Or are there hidden complexities, trade-offs, if you will, maybe even new kinds of dependency that come with them?
I'm going to play the advocate with my own arguments. There's 2 main complexities I see. One is the complexity itself of doing blockchain. I think that as an industry, we have failed big time in doing things user-friendly. So it's really complicated. It was really complicated. It's a really complex technology to explain. And as long as we do not do a better job on how easy it is to interact with the technology, we will not have adoption. There's a project that I work quite close with them. They're in the Netherlands, and they have been working on with the municipalities in the Netherlands. And the founder always say, blockchain is like the Fight Club. What is the first rule of the Fight Club? You don't talk about it. And I was at the beginning like, no, people need to understand what is happening and how you do it. And I changed my mind after quite some time, because I think it's the same with many other technologies that we use. I use my phone all the time, so much that I think that I have an addiction problem with my phone because I'm all the time on the phone. But if you ask me how my phone works, I will never be able to explain you. But it's a useful tool for me. I drive my car all the time. If you ask me how my car works, I won't be able to explain you. I use them, even though I do not understand how they work to the nitty-gritty details, because they're useful for me. And this is the level that we need also with blockchain. We need people using it because it's useful, not because they understand absolutely everything. And here, let me put you an example, because I fight this argument so many times that I have arguments in both ways. You need to really understand what you're using because that's where the transparency coin. No. You need to understand how your data is treated, what is happening with your data, and how to use the application and why it's useful for you. the nitty-gritty details on how the consensus mechanism working, like the certificates of the smart contract, if actually like everything was done properly, I mean, you can get the information. Will you understand them? Most likely, no. I've been in the industry 10 years. Probably I will also not get it. So there's different levels of knowledge and information that we need to share. And here's my example, because this is the best one that I have heard so far, that I had so far. If someone has a different one or you have a different one, like I would love to hear it. But it is like driving in the city, right? In order to be able to drive in the city, you have regulatory authorities that understand how the city is designed and how people behave in the city in order to make the rules for you to drive. They create the traffic lights, you have the parking signs here. They also tell you if you want to drive that you need to pass a test, and they create the criteria for you to pass that test. If you want to drive, you need to, well, buy a car or rent a car, and you need to do the test, theoretical and practical. But if your car gets broken, we are not expecting you to know how to fix it. Like, I mean, if it's a wheel that is flat, then you should supposed to change it because that's the basics. And that also comes with your test. But if the motor is broke, you take it to a mechanical person that has a study and has certificates to check that part of the car, right? So there's different levels of understanding. The regulator that did the rules, he probably also doesn't know how the motor works and could not help your car or like fix your car, right? But all of these come into place, the different levels of knowledge come into place for us to be able to drive. And that's the same with the deployment of technologies. The regulator needs to have a good level of understanding of like what is the impact, how it's going to work, how it serves the users in order to be able to regulate it. The people that use it needs to know how to use it, and they probably will use it because it's useful. You need to have like some security requirements in place in order to make it safe for everyone. And you need to have people that know how to build cars and how to fix them. And that's our developers, right? So all of these different things come into place. So on that, I think that we spend so much time talking about the consensus mechanisms, the blockchain itself, how it works, everything that does, that we have not focused on how we make it useful for the people that want to use it. And this has been a big failure on our side. So that's one of the complexities. The second one, which is even more complex, and this is something that I've been discussing a lot lately because we have been reopening the GDPR in Europe, is the data protection part in the privacy of the blockchain. Because in public blockchains, everything, every single transaction is there. In a private permission blockchain, this doesn't apply. But for public blockchain, every single thing is recorded there for everyone to see, right? Which means that if someone has or someone knows about my wallet, they can see every transaction that I have ever done with that wallet. And this part, I found it a little bit problematic, especially if we have systems of surveillance. I wouldn't like everyone to know what I'm buying, where I'm buying it, and how I'm buying it, or how much money there is in my wallet, right? So I think that those are the two main complexities that I see on the blockchain space. That was your question,
Yeah,
right?
that actually brings me to something I've been wanting to ask you. We've kind of drifted a little from the main thread, but that's what happens when the topic's engaging. It's a good thing. So staying with this question of privacy and data management, there's another layer that always comes up for me, and that's governance. Because blockchain doesn't just change how data is handled, it also changes how decisions are made through these decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, as you call them.
DAOs, yes.
In that model, governance happens through digital tokens that give people voting power. But of course, when a few large holders, the so-called whales, control a big share, that raises questions of about fairness. How does that concentration of power affect the democratic legitimacy and the overall effectiveness of DAO governance, especially when we start thinking about its application to AI?
Okay. Again, so the governance part is only the O in DAOs. And what you're talking is not democracy, it's plutocracy. That's one DAO, one token, one vote. And that's where the waste problem come. When you have many tokens, will mean you have many voting power, right? But this is only one way of doing governance. You also have one person, one vote. You also have quadratic voting. Then you have a mix of all of these. One wallet, one vote. And I mean, like, there's many, many, many different ways in which you can do it. If you're interested on that, Project Liberty published a report that is I think they call it the cookbook, if I'm not wrong, on governance. And what they did was a overview of different governance forms that you can implement via the blockchain. You have like also examples there of how the different protocols have been doing it. I do agree with you. One vote, one token is a plutocratic system. When I have been discussing this with communities, they said, yeah, but if I have more tokens, that means that I have more in stake because I have more interest on that protocol. Well, that doesn't mean that you should have like more right to vote than others, right? In certain things. So for certain decisions, I think that there should be a mix of how, like, for example, if it's about the protocol itself and updates to the protocol or the market cap, I will say there's more interest on the people that has more tokens because they're going to be the ones that are mostly impacted if there is an increase or decrease in market cap.
Mariana,
But yep.
You mentioned Cord earlier. Could you tell us a bit more about how it actually works? I'm really curious about that. And connected to that, I keep wondering how things like reputation-based voting could help spread power a bit more evenly. Because you're right, one person, one vote sounds great, but one wallet, one vote, that's a whole different story. You can have as many wallets as you want. So what do you think could work better in practice? What kind of approaches might make these governance systems feel a bit fairer, a bit more balanced?
I do not think that there's one that is better than the others, to be quite honest. I think that depending, and this has been one of the arguments that I always make when I'm talking about governance systems, not only for DAOs, but in general, and is you need to understand which decisions are going to be needed inside that particular organization or project, and based on that, decide how you want to make those decisions. Because governance basically are the rules of the game on how you interact. That's what I said is the O on DAOs because it's the organizational part. So who can submit proposals? Who can vote for the proposals? How we discuss the proposals? All of these are part of that governance. And again, depending of and that's what I was trying to explain before, depending of the decision that is going to be discussed, the way in which you decide might be different, but that also depends of your value chain, I would say, and own preference and your own concept of justice. Because for me, when we are discussing governance, we are discussing on justice and fairness on the decisions that we are making, right? And that will really depend on the agreement that you have as an organization on how you will proceed. Quadratic voting, I don't know if I can explain it really well. It's a little bit complicated because not as simple as one vote, one token, one wallet, like one vote, one token, one vote, or one person, one vote, or one wallet, one vote, but it's actually more into the participation and reputation that you have within that ecosystem, what will give you the weight that you can use to vote, which makes a lot of sense for most of the decisions. Reputational, both voting, it also depends of the transparency and the community itself, how you build reputation. There's different ways of building reputation. I just don't think that there is a simple solution, and I don't think that there is just one solution that can serve all the projects.
Yeah. So DAO governance brings up all these big questions about democracy and legitimacy, right? But governance doesn't really happen in isolation. It's always tied to laws and rules, the whole regulatory landscape. And that's where it gets messy. I mean, one of blockchain's main features is immutability. Once something's there, it stays. But then you got things like the GDPR, the right to be forgotten, where people can ask for their personal data to be erased. That's a real clash. So how do we deal with that in practice? You know, in a blockchain-based AI system, how do you make those two ideas work together? Could we maybe keep the sensitive data off-chain but still verify it on-chain? Would that kind of setup actually solve the contradiction or just move it somewhere else?
I mean, that's already done, right? You do not put personal data on the blockchain just because of GDPR, but also because it's just really expensive. You don't put the data in the blockchain. The blockchain is not a database. If you need to store data, just go somewhere else. Don't use blockchain. It makes no sense. That's a tough question because that's what we were discussing. I don't think that here technology is the solution or the answer. I think the definition of what personal data is the main issue, right? Because will you consider that your wallet address is personal data?
Do I consider that the wallet, to the extent that there's
your
only
address.
one and it belongs to me? Yes.
It's more complex than that, because it is not because it belongs to you, it's because of the fact that they could identify who you are via your wallet. And if that is true, then that shouldn't be on the blockchain because there's no right to be forgotten, but because you cannot enhance the right to be forgotten, which will mean that every single public blockchain and every single blockchain application.
How could they identify me? Because my name and my wallets, unless they go back to the banking system.
Yes.
Law, the judicial system is asking for that information in legal manner.
No, but that's not the question of but that's not the question of GDPR. The definition of data privacy basically says that it's like any piece of information that can allow your identification. Whether that is easy or not, it is not in the definition, right? And that's what I'm saying. Like, it is actually a problem of the definition in regulation, because under that definition, just because of the fact that I can actually identify you via asking the bank to open that information or not, doesn't matter. But I can identify you with the wallet address. So technically it will be GDPR, which means every blockchain is non-compliant. And that's a reality. And if that is the understanding that we are going to give to the regulation, then no blockchain is compliant. And that's actually a problem that is not going to be solved by the technology. It's going to be solved by reviewing the regulation and trying to understand how technology works in order to regulate it properly. And here, going back to my example of the mobility sector and the rules, here there is a clear sign that in the moment that that regulation was produced, they did not know how blockchain works. And it's as simple as that. You can keep the information off chain. Yes, you can. That's it. But what happened with these other pieces of information that are going to be there just because of the way that we need to produce it and use it for the technology itself to work, that can also lead to a connection with a person. I probably that's not the answer that you want, but it's a horrible answer, but it's simple. If we understand it like that, it's just simply not compliant.
I'm not fishing for any specific answer. You know, I'm talking to the expert.
I'm not an expert on GDPR. I'm far from doing that.
You are an expert on your understanding on how things work in this aspect of GDPR, and data protection is a very complex one. I wasn't looking for any specific answer. I know there are blind spots that are very complicated to overcome.
And I don't know if you have ever had like a GDPR claim to you, that someone has come to you with a GDPR claim.
No, I have come to people with GDPR claims.
Okay.
I'm actually in court right now.
In some cases, I think that it just makes absolutely no sense what we are asking for the industry to do. And I have also seen how people weaponize GDPR against others. So it's not my favorite piece of regulation. I love data privacy. I think that is really, 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 really important. But I just don't think this one is one of the ones that I would like to review, actually.
Maybe you get a chance. Given that regulations around AI vary greatly worldwide, with the EU stringent rules contrasting starkly against other regions with more relaxed standards, how can blockchain assist global organizations in applying consistent ethical standards across different jurisdictions? And are there clear examples of how this has successfully been done?
I think that here we already covered it before, and I think that what blockchain will be great in doing is on the traceability of the data. So we have like better understanding of the life cycle of the data that's being used, but also on the accountability part. If we manage to understand who is responsible for what and where via the blockchain. But I think that I already covered that a little bit when we were talking about like the public records as well. And the compliance part. I think that actually like that's how. At the end, when it comes about how we are deploying AI, I think the AI Act was a good landmark. I'm not saying it's perfect; it's far from being perfect, but was a good exercise of trying to understand and categorize risk levels for the different AIs that we are deploying based on how they can impact people. So on principle, I think that that's a great approach. And I think that that's also the approach that the UN resolution took because they also focus on how we can use AI systems to push forward the SDGs. And that was the core of the resolution. We published a report on an overview of different AI regulatory efforts globally. And that risk approach is something that we have seen across regions. So I think that's a good effort. The thing is that I'm not worried about the people that want to be compliant and that want to follow ethical principles. I'm worried about those that do not care about being compliant and follow ethical principles and common sense, if such a thing can still exist in our societies. And for that...
Voltaire wrote, common sense is not that common. So
yeah, which I agree.
It's been a concern for a very long time.
Indeed. So for that part, I think what I would like to see is more accountability. Because if there is misuse of technology and we do not do anything about it, that's sending the wrong message to everyone. So yeah, I mean, it's not an easy one. You're not making easy questions today, and it's Friday. But I think that it's really important that we discuss that, because yeah, I'm never worried about good people doing things. I'm just worried about like we making hard for good people to do the right things and be innovators because we're putting too much regulation on them. Um, and then letting the bad people do bad things because they will not be compliant. They do not care about regulation. They will simply do bad things. And if we do not pursue them, we don't try to enforce the regulation on them, if we do not have accountability process in place, if suddenly international law doesn't care about anything because we just simply let it pass for these people, then that's really a horrible message that we're sending to everyone. Because if you're compliant, who cares? Like, we will probably like give you fines if you are not fully compliant. We don't care if you try, you just did it wrong, right? But if you are not compliant whatsoever and you're bad and we don't have how to enforce it, well, what can we do? We cannot enforce it. That's horrible. So it's horrifying to think. And I'm afraid that that's the direction that we are going as society.
Well, I'm not sure where this will go, but let's see. You mentioned the SDGs, and that got me thinking. It's not going to be easier to answer. Sorry, not asking easy questions. I'm trying to go beyond the obvious, to question the way we see things, to get a sense of what's behind it all. So, beyond regulation, there's this other issue that's hard to ignore: the environmental side of things. Both blockchain and AI use a lot of energy. And when you start combining the two, it becomes a real concern. How do we handle that responsibility? Or how do we handle that responsibly? I mean, what can organizations actually do to reduce their carbon footprint? Could things like proof of stake systems or more energy efficient AI hardware make a real difference? Or are we just moving the problem somewhere else?
Okay, I do not think I agree with the question. And I'm going to, I mean, not with the question, but with statement made on the question. AI use a lot of energy. AI is really, really energy intense because of the computational power that we need to actually like keep the models working. That is a problem that we really need to address, and we need to see how we solve it. It might be that we solve it by making these companies to buy tons of carbon credits and other things to compensate the use of that energy in a way that they repay society for the consumption of energy that that they need to operate, also because they are super profitable. So why are they not paying back? That might be the answer. Putting AI and blockchain at the same level on the energy consumption, that's where I do not agree. And I do not agree because when we were discussing AI regulation, the energy consumption part was not something that I saw really strong at the table. But when we were discussing blockchain, that's something that actually like was so intense that in Europe we almost banned proof of work because of the energy consumption. And when I was discussing these topics, I always ask like, people is saying that blockchain consumes a lot of energy, but if you say a lot, that means that you have a comparison. So with what are we comparing? Like the blockchain consumption of energy. Then some people say the country of Denmark. And I was like, okay, has anyone actually like measured the crypto consumption of energy with the traditional financial system consumption of energy. Because if you're talking about a new system, and he was like looking at the tokens, why are you comparing that with a country? I mean, why don't comparing this with a similar activity? Why a country? And then there's not really good answer for that, because if you look at the traditional financial system, well, what would you need to measure the energy consumption? You not only need to measure the energy consumption of the different transactions that they have, you need to measure their operations. They have offices everywhere. They consume light. They consume water. Like the people working for them, they also consume some when they're at the office. They have computers. They have also like their own databases and systems and cloud computing. So there's a lot of like things that they're using there. So why are we not measuring them to just like have a constraint point? Someone did that report. I don't remember where I saw it, but like when you do that, the comparison, the traditional financial system actually consumes more energy than blockchain. Don't believe me? Check it out. The report is somewhere in the internet. I found it. So you can check it out as well. So this statement is not really based in anything different that a lot of lobby. I'm not saying by whom or whom. I was not there. I don't know. Probably banks that were scared on the impact of the crypto space in their own operations and their own profits margin. So that was a lot of lobby that was done. And the compromising that we got in NICAR was to have some reporting on the emissions, not only at the energy level, but water consumption and other things by token, right? Which is also complete nonsense if you look at sustainability regulation, because normally the sustainability, like, I don't mean it's nonsense in the way that they requested, it's nonsense in the way that they requested and they hand over this to the industry for the industry to come with a way to report it. Because what is done in sustainability regulation is that you have the regulation, and the regulator and the authorities come with the standards and the methodologies that you need to implement. Not the other way around. We don't tell the industry, let us know how to report. We don't go to the oil companies and say, like, you come with a methodology to report your emissions, right? Like that's not how it's done. So this was completely backwards. But the industry has done a lot of things to try to be compliant. And here's the other thing. When you talk about like ESG reporting and you talk about sustainability reporting, you normally talk about the emissions, but you also talk about the way that you mitigate and the actions that you take to actually like do positive impact. And on this, the blockchain industry has a big chunk of activities that has been done to improve this, right? We have not only sustainable mining and the things that we do to run actually like the tokens, but projects that have been deployed that can only work because of the blockchain, that are generated impact in societies in a positive way. We have tons of projects doing carbon credit tokenization. We have circular economies. We have some projects also doing sustainable agriculture, empowering farmers, bringing people to the financial sector that were previously excluded. All of this is positive impact that we also need to take into account when we want to understand the impact of these particular technologies into the ESGs. Not just the bad, we need to take also the good into consideration. So yeah, long story short, and again, this is just my opinion. I think that for the blockchain space has not been fair. How we solve it, I already mentioned, this goes also for AI. Just create systems for repaying the emissions, right? We have seen this in different industries. So why are we not doing the same, especially to companies like Meta, Google, OpenAI, it's like whatever most names is now, what they're doing with the AI that they're producing, all of them are really profitable. Why are we not doing a tax to them for the contamination that they're doing, for the emissions that they're doing? Why are they not repaying that back to societies? I think that would be like the first way to move forward. And that's, again, not technology solution. That's a human solution.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how profitable they really are. What I keep hearing is that they're constantly investing, and that, in many cases, they're actually losing money. I mean, they're making massive investments, not just profits. And I'm not saying this to defend them. It's just to keep things in perspective. Since we talked about tokenization earlier, this connects quite naturally. You might think I'm just digging, and maybe I am, but I think it's worth it. Tokenization, turning assets like carbon credits into blockchain tokens, is supposed to make environmental claims more transparent. But it can also, easily slip into greenwashing if it's not done properly. So how do we make sure that blockchain-based tokenization really brings accountability, that it measures genuine environmental impact rather than becoming another symbolic gesture, another form of compliance theater?
That's a good one. I like that one. I have a super concrete example. There is a project in the US called Demia. And what they created was a system that integrates different sustainability reporting methodologies into their system. And they basically what they do is that if you are doing environmental claims, you need to prove them. The way you prove them is with data. So in this case, if you have a factory and you have tons of sensors that are collecting data, these sensors are directly connected to the blockchain. So whatever the sensor is reporting, it goes directly to the blockchain, right? So this cannot be tamper-proof. And they have a matrix that gives you trust points. To every single point of data is received like a qualification. So if the sensor was actually reviewed, if it's not a sensor and it was human data, well, the qualification is lower because, well, can be human error. If the sensor was failing, like everything that happened with the data before it touches the blockchain receives like some marks. And this gives you the trust like levels that you can have in each of those points. Then all of this information passed via the methodologies that you have, whether it's gold standards, social carbon, Nordic trust, like all of them. And then you get the punctuation for that data. And this information goes to the auditors. So the auditors can see the information that they are claiming. And based on that, as they normally do, say like all of the information, produce this amount of carbon credits, right? This is how it normally works, but it's a manual process. So with all of this, blockchain is already helping you a lot to avoid greenwashing because the information is what it is. It's what is coming from there. And then you have the trust points. And they also use AI to actually understand what are the potential productions of that factory when it comes to carbon credits in X amount of time due to the previous one. So it's just doing like also like data analytics and modeling what could happen there. So this is already an example of how we can use blockchain to prevent greenwashing. And it's really interesting because the most trusted information you have and is used for the production of the credit, well, more expensive the credit is. So there is also an incentive for the people in these factories and plants to implement the technology to actually have like better level of carbon credits. And they're doing this also not only with plants, but also in cooperation with Hyper, and they put towers in the Amazonas to actually analyze the carbon sequestration of different areas in the Amazonas to help the communities to preserve the area. Because, well, not cutting trees is one of the main things you can do to support the carbon sequestration. But these people need to have like something that they get out of it because they need to feed their families. They need to also be profitable. And if the way of them to be profitable is not doing nothing and preserving the ecosystem, we need to prove that actually that ecosystem is doing carbon sequestration. And this is the way that they are doing it as well. So like towers there that collect the information, put it on the blockchain. So we know that there was no alteration, was what the sensors in the plant in the tower was reporting. And then they produce credits that they are like given to the communities back. So they're really cool examples of those projects already deployed and that are working as well.
They sound great. this idea of symbolic compliance, it leads us straight to another critical issue, equity, and who actually benefits. Because when we talk about technology, it's easy to forget that not everyone starts from the same place. Maybe we can look at this through the lens of global participation. Do these technologies empower less privileged communities, or do they risk reinforcing existing inequalities? Some people talk about a kind of digital colonialism, where powerful actors harvest data from vulnerable communities without giving anything back. Could blockchain in practice end up doing the same thing? Or on the contrary, could it help ensure that the benefits of data are shared more fairly, globally?
So again, does blockchain and AI by themselves do not increase inequalities or closes the gap, is how we humans deploy them. But blockchain do have like certain benefits, and is what I was talking about, the data economy. If we are the owners of the data, then we decide with whom to share it and which incentive are we willing to receive in order for us to share that information right now. What we have right now is just they take the data and then they profit from the data and we get nothing. That's in the global south, that's global north, that's whatever. That's how it works right now. But if I'm the owner of the data and not them, then I should be the one that profits from my data because it's mine, right? And blockchain can create that system to do so. Blockchain also like looking at, I'm opening a rabbit hole that we can go for hours here. But DeFi is doing quite a great job on financial inclusion. There is a project called Ethics Hub, which is also like one of my favorites because they decided to focus in the agriculture sector. And I think that for us that live in cities, we tend to forget how important agriculture is. I mean, it's as basic as no agriculture, no food, no nothing is the primary pillar of human societies. And even though we do not pay attention to our farmers, and there's a lot of farmers that live in poverty, and they cannot access the financial sector because many reasons. They might be in isolated areas, so they do not have the banking infrastructure. They do not have how to access money and loans because they do not have a collateral or a history with the bank. And sometimes they have collaterals, but the collateral is the land that they own in really isolated areas that the bank doesn't want because to whom they're going to sell it. So they're completely excluded. And what Ethics Hub is doing is created a platform that connects impact investors with communities of farmers. And they have a really beautiful project because they go to the communities, they onboard the collectives, they talk to them. So there is also like trust in the project. They know who is there. They onboarded, then they have the investors. They created a collateral on the platform that I'm not really sure how it works like that. Like I would really recommend it to get in contact with them and have a whole episode in what they're doing because they're great. But they have a collateral in case that if one of the farmers doesn't pay, they can still repay the investor. So the investor gets always incentivized to keep investing in the farmers. I think that last year, if I'm not wrong, I remember correctly the numbers, and the numbers are not my best. Is my best thing. They already distributed or like over like 1 million or it was like more than $1 million to farmers in the global south.
All right. I'd like to go through the remaining questions. I know you have to leave in about 15 minutes.
A little bit before.
So let's take a step forward. When we look ahead, emerging technologies like Web3 and quantum computing bring a whole new set of ethical and practical challenges for blockchain and AI. let's reflect for a moment on these new frontiers. Web3, for example, blends decentralized blockchain networks with immersive virtual spaces, the metaverse. And increasingly, those spaces are driven by AI. What kinds of ethical issues might come from the convergence? Things like privacy violations, psychological effects, new forms of inequality. How do we start anticipating those challenges now before they take shape? And how can we address them proactively rather than waiting until they become problems?
I mean, I think that the main issue here is access, if we can put it simple, right? Not everyone has access to the internet, and not everyone will have access to these technologies. I was reading the news that I think it was Saudi that already made like AI accessible to the whole country. Well, I mean, like that's thing that Saudi can do. I don't think that we can expect that movement from every single country in the world. But access is going to be one of the major issues here because we are going to have like entire populations that are not going to be able to profit from these technologies, right? Um, and I think that again, that is not a tech question. That is a human and humanity question. And we go back to what you were discussing before, right? Are we going to make the internet a human right? Are we going to make the access to AI a human right? Is this even priorities when we have not been able to solve poverty and hunger and other inequalities? I actually don't know. But I think that this is going to, if we do not address this is going to increase that gap between societies.
Now, here's a more technical one. Quantum computing, it has the potential to challenge, maybe even break, the encryption methods that make today's blockchain secure. And since blockchain data is by design permanent, that's not a small concern. So how serious is that risk, really? And how soon should we start thinking about integrating quantum-resistant cryptography into blockchain and AI systems?
I'm not a technical person, so my only thoughts on that is that yeah, it is a risk, and it is a current risk, and it's an immediate risk. So I'm sure that the protocols are already looking into this because yes, quantum will break everything.
Okay, so that was the technical side of things. Let's come back to ethics for a moment, because in the end, that's where so much of this really lands. It's important to face one of the big criticisms often made about the tech sector, the idea of ethics washing, these superficial ethical commitments that sound good but don't change much in practice. So how could blockchain help create real transparency? I mean, things like verifiable logs of decision-making, could it actually push organizations beyond appearances toward genuine accountability in AI? And what should they be careful about? What are the pitfalls to avoid if they truly want transparency to mean something and not just become another form of window dressing?
I think that those are like 15 questions trying to be packed into one. And I'm, for the sake of repeating myself, I think that is the compliance part and the accountability part, right? Like if we know who is behind, I mean, who is profiting from the deployment of certain technology? Who is responsible for the deployment of certain technology? Who is responsible at certain times on the deployment of certain technology? Then we have better chances of actually being able to respond if something happened. And I think that this is the most important part. I mean, when you were talking about like ethics, I'm really advocate of ethics, although I understand that it's sometimes subjective. And what ethics means to me might not be what it means to you, because we grow up in different parts of the world. But I do think that there are like some fundamental principles that need to be agreed upon everyone. I mean, if you want to call it like ethics or value or guidance, like I don't care as long as we agree in what those are. And this is what I was mentioning with like the human-centered design. Like we need to understand what will happen if we deploy certain technology in certain population or to certain people, and what are the risks and what are the mitigation measurements that we need to take in order to address those risks, right? And what happens if we don't do anything? Who is going to be responsible and what are the consequences? So for me, like these are the parts that we need to address. Blockchain help us identifying where the failure might have been or who has been responsible at a certain point, but it is just a tool. And as I mentioned, like bad people will find always new ways to keep in the to stay in the shadows. And what we need to do is to find also tools to bring them to light, whether it is for them to start being bad or whether for us to know who they are and being able to take in actions.
There's another dimension to this. As blockchain and AI begin to automate more and more aspects of governance, there's a real risk that human judgment could start to fade from the process, especially in areas like healthcare or even judicial decisions. How do we keep human accountability and ethical judgment at the center of these systems as they become increasingly automated? What does that balance look like in practice?
I think I already replied to that as well. Depending of the decisions that you're making, you need like human oversight. Like you need a human making the last call at the end. Like we cannot just like leave everything to technology. At least it's as simple as that, at least for me.
Okay, so maybe to wrap things up, whether we're talking about policymakers, tech experts, or just people who care about where all this is heading, what can they actually do right now? What concrete actions can help shape the ethical development and the responsible use of AI and blockchain? Because in the end, it's not about the technology itself, but about how we choose to use it.
I mean, I think that we have already like good frameworks in place. Like when looking at the AI Act, like I think that like that already provides a lot of guidance of what they need to do. And depending of like in which parameter they are located on the risk of the AI that they are deploying, what actions they need to do. I think policymakers just like, I mean, at least here in Europe, like we already have the AI Act. What we need to start is just like looking of how this is actually like being implemented and how much we can enforce it if that is the case, but also like looking at like the entrepreneurs and SMEs that are here and how they're innovating and which solutions are we bringing into place and how we actually can help those solutions that are really great and that are like supporting and pushing societies forward, how we empower them to actually like keep growing and scaling. Because I think that like the solution is not in more regulation, but the solution is into supporting those that are creating solutions that are truly good for us, growing, like the ones that I mentioned, like Demia, Ethics Hub. Well, there's tons of them that are right now being deployed. They just need some support, whether it's financial or like understanding compliance or like getting partnerships, like or like getting the visibility that they need to just keep scaling. So I think that that's what we should be focusing.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our conversation. I always finish with the same question. What is it we're not talking about, but we should be? Of course, it can be something connected to what we've discussed today, but it doesn't have to be. If there's a topic you feel really deserves more attention? Something we're collectively overlooking? Please, go ahead.
I think that one of the topics that we should be discussing more is what is happening at the accountability part, because we have extreme cases. We have the case of Tornado Cash in the Netherlands, where we took a developer and made him, or like say that he was guilty of money laundering, not because of what he did directly, but what people did with his application and the intention behind. True, seeing AI deployed to massacre people and not doing anything about it. So there is a big hypocrisy in those two extremes. And I think that this requires more attention of people.
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you for your time. It was a great conversation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Looking forward to have you again on inSUBSTANTIA in the future. Bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.